welcome everybody. My name is Tom Crosley, and I have with me Adam Crosley, and we're with Fairoaks IT. I've been in the IT business and the security business for over 30 years now. And let me jump right into the slides here. So today, what we're going to cover is we're going to cover several security threats to your business and why we need to pay attention to them, what the impacts of them can be. We'll touch a little bit on how you can protect yourself, but before you can protect yourself, the first thing you need to know is where the threats are coming from. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And we're going to cover, interestingly, by far the number one security threat to your business that you don't even probably think about, a truth about bank fraud and how business accounts are impacted differently than personal accounts. It's a totally different security field today. Firewalls and antivirus just don't provide the kind of coverage that you need today. The threat landscape today has evolved significantly, has become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more prevalent than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And lastly, we're going to talk about how mobile devices, phones, and cloud applications can seriously jeopardize your company's information and your reputation. Ultimately, what we're going to cover is you don't want to be a sitting duck. You work so hard to get to where you are. Your business has a lot of moving parts, and you work so hard to get there. And what we're going to cover is some ways that you can protect yourself so that that doesn't get taken away from you. For those that stay on through the end of this, hopefully everybody, we've got a bonus for you, and we're going to be offering up a free dark web scan. And during this webinar, we'll be talking about why that's important for you to keep an eye on. So let's start with, who am I? Who's Tom Crosley? So I've been doing IT for 31 years now. I started back in 1991, and it was probably about 10 years ago or so, after having worked with so many businesses over 20-something years and seeing the types of challenges that small businesses had in managing their IT, it kind of dawned on me that what we really need to do is we need to bring enterprise-grade support to small and mid-sized companies. We need to bring the kind of support that the GEs and the Xeroxes of the world have to protect their businesses down to the small business, and make it affordable. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've taken that same approach with IT security, with data security. So we're becoming more of a data security firm than an IT management firm, and we're taking the same approach. We're bringing enterprise-grade security support to small and mid-sized companies. We can do that because we have a large user base. We can afford to buy the tools. We can afford to do the training. And it's very intense and specific types of training that we have to go through to bring this to small businesses. But that's on us to bring to the small business. So let's get started with just kind of a quick background of why cybercrime is happening and how it evolved and what it is. And make no mistake about it, that cybercrime is a business. 10 years ago, it was the kid in their parents' basement that might want to do something like, I don't know, just disrupt your day, pop a funny message up on your screen. But those days are gone. And today it's organized crime, essentially. We're seeing a lot of it come out of the old Soviet Union, but it is big business. And we'll talk about that some more. And really, with the advent of the internet, it gave criminals a way of expanding their business opportunities. Again, they're treating this as a business, and in the early days, you got a knife and you stuck somebody up on the path, and you were able to rob one person at a time, and then technology evolved, and we had trains in the Old West, and now there were train robbers, and a small group of people could rob 30, 40, 100 people at a time. And then fast forward again, and now we have the internet, and very low barrier to entry. Criminals now can attack thousands to hundreds of thousands of people at one time in pretty much total anonymity. So it's the advent of the internet has provided a lot of benefits for us, but it's also opened us up to a lot of risk. How much risk? Last year, 80 million households experienced some sort of cybercrime, and 7 million small to medium-sized businesses were hacked last year. So let me just, a couple of things to understand here. When somebody attacks a small business, it could be something as simple as a spoofed email that you give up your credentials and they get into your email account, or it could be something where you get a phishing email and somebody gets access to your network. And just some numbers to keep in mind. The average time that a criminal is in your network, once they get access, the average time a criminal is in your network till they're discovered is 171 days. So for half a year, they're in your network watching everything you're doing, everything that's going on, stealing everything you have. And most businesses don't even know when their network is compromised. So as I mentioned, it's a thriving black market. Why do they do this? They're looking to steal data because they can monetize the data. For example, if they get a hold of your credit card details, they can sell that for anywhere from $2 to $90. iTunes accounts. They can send out an email and get 1,000 people to give up their iTunes credentials. That's worth $8,000 for them. And we're going to talk about how they monetize that too. So there's a lot of ways that the bad guys can monetize your information. And that's really what they're after. They're after your information. So it's a business. The first kind of the father of ransomware is a guy from Russia, and they estimate that he cleared $11 billion before he was shut down, and he's still on the loose. By the way, they haven't found him yet. I think you can hide pretty well if you've got $11 billion. But what he did was he revolutionized ransomware because he actually turned it into a business, and he started selling his ransomware so that little mini criminals could buy his ransomware. They could rent it from him. He would get a cut of everything. And he just kind of took this whole ransomware process and turned it into a real business. So you wonder, we're small, nobody's going to want to hack us, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not what the statistics show. 20% of small businesses every year fall victim in some form to cybercrime. Small businesses are fairly easy to attack. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you talk about the enterprise level companies, their spend for IT per employee per year. So how many dollars they spend on IT for every employee annually is somewhere around $15,000 a year. And again, we're talking enterprise. So the GMs, the Xeroxes, companies like that. Over $10,000 of what they're spending on IT is towards security. So think about your business. If you got 20 employees, how much money are you spending on data security for those 20 employees? It's probably not $10,000. So the tools that are available to small businesses are much less sophisticated than the tools that the big enterprise companies are using. So small businesses are a pretty easy target for the bad guys. And 70% of all the cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses, again, because the bad guys know that that's an easy target. So why don't we hear more about this type of activity? The FBI estimates that approximately only 10% of companies that suffer a breach report it. And I can tell you in our experience, and having done this for years and years, and having worked with a lot of companies that have suffered breaches, that number is very generous. I would say that less than 1% of the companies that experience an attack will actually report it. And why? Well, it's embarrassing, right? You don't want to let the community know that you've been hacked. You're a small business, you deal with local people that you know, and it's not a good thing to say that you've been hacked. As I alluded to before, a lot of people don't even know they've been hacked. The bad guys are crawling around their network and they don't even know it. And it takes a certain type of tool set and a certain type of training to be able to know when somebody's inside a network. It's horrible PR, you know. Your employees, your clients, your patients, businesses don't want people to know that that their information was released into the wild because of something that they did or didn't do. And then there's also legal ramifications, fines, lawsuits. It goes on and on. There's the cost of a breach is extremely high, and so I'll talk a little bit about and we see this, right? So I talk about my cousin who's a paramedic, and I can't drive with her because I'm from Massachusetts, and I drive like a Massachusetts person, and she drives like a little old lady, and it drives me crazy to sit in the car with her. But she drives like that because she has been to countless accident scenes. She knows what happens when people don't drive responsibly. In the same manner, we know what happens to people when they don't treat their data responsibly. We're the ones that have to go in and clean up the mess, and it's a tough thing to happen. I literally have had a business owner sit in front of me and cry tears because of a problem with data. So this is, when it happens to you, it's a big deal, just like a car accident. So if you're not worried about information being stolen, that doesn't mean that your customers or your employees don't worry about their information being stolen, because ultimately you're the custodian of their information, right? Your business uses that information to make money in whatever form your business is doing, or as a nonprofit to provide services. So you have that information, and you do have a responsibility to be a good steward of that information. What we see is the biggest danger to small businesses with data security is just underestimating the importance, underestimating the risk. And when we talk about risk, you know, when you get into the cybersecurity discussions, and any discussion, risk is a combination of the probability of something happening multiplied by the impact of that event happening. So if you've got a high probability of something happening and it's got a high impact, it's a very high risk because it's multiplied. And what we're seeing in the last 2 to 3 years is that the frequency of attacks since COVID started has gone up by 600%. We saw that map in the beginning, right? That's an indication. The impact of attacks has gone up tremendously also. Just as an example, the average ransomware demand 5 years ago was $300. The average ransomware demand 2 years ago was just under $3,000. The average ransomware in 2022 is just under $1 million. So the impact has changed dramatically. So what we're talking about today is the 7 biggest threats to your organization. And this webinar is meant to be an intro to what these threats are, because again, if you're going to protect yourself against something, the first thing you have to know is what the threat is before you can even put a plan together to protect yourself. So we're going to concentrate on what the threats are. We'll have future webinars that will talk about how we can help you, how you can protect yourself from some of these threats. We'll touch on that a little bit today, but the first thing is identifying what the threats are. So the number one threat, I know we don't have a community chat going here, but just in your mind, think about what would you think the number one threat to your company is? It's not the cyber criminals that are the number one threat. It's your employees. And why do I say that? 92% of all data breaches within a company are caused by employees. 92%. If you think about it, your employees are your first layer of defense against cybercrime. They're the ones that are opening the emails. They're the ones that are clicking on the websites. That's kind of a shocking number, that 92% of the data breaches are traced back to an employee action. And it's not malicious employees. It's good employees make mistakes. It happens sometimes. It's something where the employees need to be consistently vigilant. Every email, every web page, and even trained employees can make mistakes. They make far fewer mistakes, but even trained employees can make mistakes. So when you think about some of the practices employees do, they often use free file sharing applications like Dropbox. Your company information can end up in Dropbox pretty easily. Maybe they just innocently put it up to their Dropbox so they can go home and do some work. If their Dropbox account gets compromised, your company information gets compromised. Another aspect of this is what they call shadow IT, which is where your company information gets put places that you don't know about. Like we just mentioned, an employee may send a file up to Dropbox. Maybe they take your entire client list, customer list, and put it in a Dropbox account so they can do some work with it. Or they email it. An employee's leaving, right? What's happening with your company data when an employee leaves? Are they emailing your client list to themselves so that they can go home and use that on the next job? Again, that's not what we see most of the time. Most of the time it's innocent, but we have to keep in mind that things like that do happen. We just talked about disgruntled employees are a huge threat. Everybody here should have a documented termination policy with IT considerations. How does it impact? What do you do when you fire an employee? It's a necessary, it's a tough thing to do. It's a hard thing to talk about, but it does happen. And disgruntled employees are a huge component of data loss for companies.
And the less systems the employees have access to, the easier it is to let somebody go and cut their ties, right? So,
right.
Another reason you don't want those Dropbox accounts, those Gmail accounts. Humans take the path of least resistance, and that's not always the right choice. So
that's right, Adam. Yep. And I don't have any stats on this, but I got to believe with the Great Resignation happening that this is, we don't have the stats on it yet, but I have to believe that this is more of a problem today than it has been in the past. Here's a case where a disgruntled vendor, an employee mistake caused a Rhode Island company to have to pay $230,000 in fines. So again, it's not the employee in this case. It was somebody that fell victim to a phishing email. It wasn't deliberate, but a vendor capitalized on that, sold some information, and this company actually went out of business over this. And there's story after story. All the components of the impact of a breach like this on a business add up, and it's reputational damage, it's loss of future orders, it's legal fees, it's remediation, like how do you get your data back, how much does it cost you to get your data back, what if you have to rebuild your systems, it's just so many components of the cost of a breach, and a lot of times it's the legal fees that are the final nail in the coffin, because these things can go on for years, some of these fights.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it a little later here, but I think, you might say, well, if I get breached or something like that, then I just won't tell anybody, but we'll talk about sort of the ramifications of that later, which are, again, fines, jail time, et cetera, because a lot of states now have personally identifiable information regulations that are going to say that you have to report. If you don't, well, there's your jail time, there's your fines. So we'll cover that a little later too.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, is the jail time. I can say that pretty much every one of the 50 states today have data breach notification laws. So if you're not familiar with those, you should look at them. And it depends on what state you're in and what compliances you have, you're subject to. But there are cases now where CEOs have gone to jail for some of the activity that's happened. All right, so employees are the number one threat. Bank fraud is a huge threat. If there's any attorneys in the audience, if there are any real estate professionals in the audience, this is some place that we're seeing this quite a bit. The FDIC does not protect your business account from bank fraud, and they're not responsible for getting your money back. I'll say the biggest thing that you can do if you realize you've done a wire fraud, a wire transfer that was not legitimate, the biggest thing you can do is immediately contact the FBI. The chances of getting your money back if you report within 8 hours are about 34%. And that's from talking with agents in the Boston area in the last year or so, which is tremendous, because 5 years ago, your chances of getting something back were almost zero. But you've got a decent chance of getting money back if you report quickly. The faster you can report, the better. We were involved with a case where the money was, the wire transfer was executed. Immediately, the person that did that clicked the button, started having doubts about it, picked up the phone, called, tried to verify, found out that it was not legitimate, immediately contacted the FBI. Turns out, though, that in this case, they weren't able to get the money back. The money transfer happened and it was transferred to a US-based bank. Within 5 minutes of the transfer, the money was then wired again to an international bank. Within 5 minutes of that, it was again transferred, and they lost track of where it went on the third transfer. So the bad guys are watching. They're actively doing this. It's not something that they just sit back and hope it works. They're watching. So the faster you can respond, the better your chances. For those of you out there who take credit cards, let's talk about that a little bit. Read the fine print of the credit card application that you signed. And what we're seeing now is that most of these applications, you are agreeing to reimburse the bank for any losses they may have if they trace the fraudulent activity on a card back to you. So if your system gets hacked and a credit card gets out there and the bank traces it back to your hack, you are, most of these applications, you are signing up to reimburse the bank for whatever the loss was, plus legal fees, anything else associated with that. And again, this is something that's kind of new that we haven't seen in the past, but something to keep an eye on as your application comes up this year. So some tips for protecting yourself. Debit cards are the number one way bank accounts are compromised. Debit cards are just like checks, and credit cards are a better way to go. So if you got debit cards, I suggest canceling them. It's the number one way that your bank account's going to get compromised. Sign up for email alerts from your bank. And you can set whatever limit you want, but sign up for email alerts so that you know, or text alerts so that you know when transactions happen at your bank. When you're doing wire transfers, require your signature and preferably multiple signatures on the wire transfer before it can get sent out. Yes, it's a little inconvenient, but it's a much safer way of doing it. Don't carry all your money in the same accounts. Spread the money out a little bit. If an account gets hacked, you don't want them to get your entire treasure chest. And carry crime insurance. And we'll talk a little bit about crime insurance and cyber liability insurance. All right, the next big threat for your business is social media. So why would I care if my Facebook account is hacked? And this number is a little old. The 600,000 accounts are hacked every day. It's probably higher than that right now. So why do I care that my Facebook account is hacked? Well, the reality is that 72% of users use the same password everywhere. So what that means is when your Facebook account is hacked, the bad guys are going to take that password and that email address, and they're going to try and sign into Bank of America, Citibank, Chase, Fidelity. They're going to try and sign into Microsoft 365. They're going to try and sign into Google. They're going to try and sign into whatever they can get into to get more information about you. So the lesson here is, and again, it's an inconvenience, but the lesson is don't use the same password over and over again.
Yeah, and I think the key there too, and not to drone on here, but on that, but you know, you might say, oh, well, I can't keep track of 50 different passwords. Well, you know, I actually don't think we mentioned this later on, but make sure you've got some sort of a password manager, right? Like a Passportal or LastPass, something like that. I mean, that way you don't have to worry about remembering all those passwords. You can set them all to be different. They can be 50 characters long if you really wanted to. That way, if one gets breached, then you just go change the one and you're good to go. That's really the key there. It's something we do for almost all of our clients. It's an easy thing to do, easy and cheap. So
excellent point. And don't keep your passwords on a spreadsheet on your PC.
Yeah, don't do that.
The bad guy gets into your PC. They have these guys are automated, right? They have software routines that scour any system they're on, looking for personally identifiable information, social security numbers, driver's licenses, credit cards.
And 9 out of 10 times when we see an Excel file with passwords in it, it's named passwords. So I guess if you're gonna do it, don't name it passwords, but don't do it.
Yeah. Another thing, just to keep in mind, that social media in your company can be a significant productivity suck. There are a significant percentage of employees that spend hours a day on social media within your company. There are ways to, through some tools, limit that if you want, but social media in most companies is a significant loss of productivity. And we worked with some of our clients where there was one user that we went back through some of the firewall logs that was watching about 6 hours of movies a day in her job, and she was stuck in an office back in the corner somewhere. Nobody knew. Social media and the video websites are a significant loss of productivity in a lot of businesses. The other thing with social media is you can get bad PR. And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but this was a social media post from Burger King that probably cost Burger King several hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. All right, let's talk about ransomware. Ransomware is probably still the largest threat to companies. It's not the fastest growing one because it's already grown, but it's probably the largest threat as far as frequency and impact. And again, frequency times impact equals risk. We talked about what the average ransomware amounts are these days. Initially, the ransomware was kind of cute, it was more of a pain in the neck than anything, but it's far from that today. And what is ransomware? Well, ransomware is where a malicious piece of software gets onto your system, and it could be because you click on a website, it could be because you receive an email, and again, I said that the bad guys are getting more sophisticated now. We've just demonstrated a type of ransomware that can be initiated from just receiving an email without even opening the attachment, and that's pretty scary. But this malicious software gets on your system, it encrypts all your files so that you can't read them anymore, and it uses an encryption that the NSA wouldn't get through. So there's no way you're going to decrypt them on your own. And then what they do is they pop up a screen like you see here, and they demand some sort of a payment to be able to get the key to decrypt your files. And again, the average demand today is going up. And also what we're seeing in the last year or so, and we actually predicted this last year, but it came true, is that when you get ransomed, not only do they encrypt your files, before they present this screen and say that you've been encrypted, in almost every case, they've exfiltrated your data, meaning they've taken a copy of everything they can get at from your computer. So everything that sits on your computer, they have a copy of. If your computer's on a network and your computer has access to network information, they've taken that. And again, these guys are big business, and they're in this to make a buck. And then what they've learned is that they can look at this information and determine how much you're able to pay. They'll take your QuickBooks file, and we've seen this, and they'll open up the QuickBooks file and they'll say, hey, you had revenues of X last year. We saw your profit was Y last year. And so this is the ransom we're asking for. And so it's this is where we get the ransomware amounts that are averaging close to $1 million now. And also they know that a lot of companies have cyber insurance, and they'll look for that information within your data. If they find out that you have cyber insurance, they're going to ask for more. The second thing with ransomware to be concerned about is, and again, this has been a big change in the last year, is, and the bad guys have adopted their business model, because a lot of companies have protection, like our clients have protection where we back up their information. So if they were to get ransomed, we have backups that are ransomware proof, that we can get our clients' data back. And the bad guys are seeing this more and more often, so they're losing money. So what they've done to kind of get their ROI back up is that now they're starting to do extortion and say, we have all this information that we took, and if you don't pay us X amount of dollars, we're going to call all your clients and we're going to tell them we got their information from you because we breached your system. And we're going to, again, every state has a requirement to report a breach, and that's public information. We've actually seen where the criminals have threatened to call the attorney general and tell the attorney general that a company was breached and they didn't report it. And how do they know? They did it. And they provided the attorney general with the proof that they got breached. So another component of ransomware that's happening today is the extortion. We kind of talked about some of these, and you've heard all these. Hospitals, ransomware is rampant. It's everywhere. We're seeing it everywhere. So have a backup that's ransomware proof, and also have the protections in place to keep the ransomware from getting in there in the first place. All right, let's talk about mobile devices, unsecured, unmonitored mobile devices. And they can be Android, they can be Apple, they can be a laptop. And everybody talks about Android and they're unsecure. Well, they're right. 97%, it's estimated that 97% of the apps on the Android store are hacked. And then the discussion generally follows to, well, that's why I use Apple. Apple is absolutely safe. Statistics show that 87% of the apps on the Apple store are hacked. So the bottom line is you got to protect yourself. So a new trend now is what they call mobile device management, MDM. And that is something that that we have grown a lot with in the last couple of years. And it's essentially bringing PC type support down to the mobile devices. A device is lost or stolen. Do you allow your users, your employees, to have company email on their phone? Probably, right? A lot of people do. Well, do you have a policy that says if you have email on your company phone, you've got to have a password on your phone, or you've got to have some sort of biometric lock on your phone, your face, your fingerprint, something like that. Because if they lose their phone, your company information is now available to anybody that picks up the phone. All right, next one we're going to talk about is spam. Spam, 70% of the breaches that happen come in from spam. And spam is any sort of unwanted email. And it can be anything from a phishing email to just an email to get you to click on a link. And a phishing email, by the way, is an email that is sent out and from a bad guy with the idea of tricking you into providing information to them that they can exploit. Or a spam could be an email that just comes in and it's got a link in it. And if you click on the link, you just downloaded a virus to your system or a ransomware to your system. 72% of the breaches that happen come in through email. What to do here? You need a good spam filter. You need a business grade email application with business grade spam filter. Ideally, you have warnings on your email. This email came from outside your company. There's a lot of different tools we can use to reduce the amount of spam, but spam is again, the biggest way that companies get breached. So I talked before, this is big business. The funny thing is that, I guess it's not funny, these businesses hire more sociologists and psychologists than they do programmers. I mentioned the father of ransomware. He had about 200 programmers on staff. And he had about 250 social engineers on staff, because their sole purpose in life is to get a user to click on something. and they want to craft an email or a website or a communication to you or the phone. We're seeing a lot more of that now, people calling on the phone. But their job is to get a user to click on something, because once a user clicks, they're in. And the seventh thing we're going to talk about is compliance. Do I have to? I know a lot of the folks in the audience here from Massachusetts. So here are the Massachusetts requirements that every business has. Whether you have other compliances, if it's PCI, if you take credit cards, if it's HIPAA, FINRA, whatever. If you're in Massachusetts, you have compliance. And I think there are 37 out of the 50 states that have compliance laws, data security laws for how to protect the data. And like I say, 50 of the state, all 50 states have the laws that say you need to report if a breach happens. And do I have to? Well, it's your decision, but we talked about this before. A Rhode Island company had to pay a $230,000 penalty over a breach that happened. So again, feel free to contact me if you like. This is Mass General Law. I'll be happy to send a copy or a link to that for you. Just reach out and we'll send that to you if you're in Massachusetts. So those were really the 7 biggest threats that we see to businesses. And so the question becomes, is there life after a cyber attack? Well, yes, there is. There's no substitute for being prepared. And that is your biggest tool, is to be prepared before it happens. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The threats are just blossoming, and every business is going to fall under attack. It's just a matter of when that attack becomes successful. We think about this all the time. We have to be right 100% of the time. You have to be right 100% of the time. The bad guy only has to be right once. He just has to slip one past you, and then he's in. So preparedness is the biggest thing that you can do. Keep in mind that 70% of all the attacks are directed at small businesses, again, mostly because their security budget is much, much less than the enterprise level. 80% of the attacks that did happen resulted in fines. We saw that fine for $230,000. And 60% of small businesses that suffer a catastrophic attack close within 18 months. So if you're still wondering if you need to protect yourself, you know my feelings on that. But what I'm going to do is, as we talked about in the beginning, we had a bonus for everybody to run a dark web scan. So this is a sample of a dark web scan we ran. And what it shows here is that we have, for this company, and by the way, there were over 100 hits on this. I just took a quick sample, but it shows the email address, it shows the password, it shows where the breach occurred. When it says not disclosed, it means the company did not report the breach. But with this information, the bad guys plug this into their computer and they just start dialing through websites, trying to get this email address and this password and see what they can get into. Again, remember, 72% of users out there reuse passwords everywhere. And if you look at this guy here, these 3 passwords are all the same. 3 different sources, he's using the same password. Here's another password, same password here for this person. Again, reusing passwords. So anybody that's here today, just let us know. We have a page you can go to. If you go to fairoaksit.com/darkweb, put in your business email address and we'll provide that report to you for free. And again, 2/3 of you are going to be pretty surprised at what comes back. All right, no obligation on that. Just go to that page, fill that out, and we'll get that over to you. So again, the purpose of today's webinar was to talk about what the threats are, because we have to know what the threat is before we can start preparing a plan. There is a lot you can do. The first step is to assess where you are. The second step is to put a plan together. And the third step is to execute the plan. And specifically things like making sure you're doing the security patching on all your PCs. Make sure you have endpoint security, advanced endpoint security, not just antivirus. Antivirus was great 5 years ago. Today, it's a speed bump for most of the bad guys. And as I mentioned before, on average, bad guys live on a network or on a PC for 171 days before they're detected. Antivirus is pretty good at keeping them from getting into the network, but think about it like the bars on a jail cell. Once it gets in, it's in. So it keeps a lot out, but once it's in, antivirus is just watching the door. It's not watching what got through. Back up your in-house and back up your cloud systems too. We're seeing cases where ransomware is happening with email accounts, where ransomware is happening with Dropbox, ransomware is happening with OneDrive. So make sure that your network and your cloud systems are backed up with a ransomware-proof backup. You got to have a good solid spam filtering and a good policies on how that's set up. Do security awareness training. Remember, 92% of breaches happen because an employee clicks on something. And if they click on it and you haven't trained them, it's your problem. It's your fault, not theirs. You can't fault them for doing something that they haven't been trained. Multi-factor authentication. I'm sure you all know what that is. I know it's inconvenient, but it is a great way to protect your accounts, especially email accounts. Email compromise is the fastest growing threat out there. Protecting bank accounts, investment accounts should all have multi-factor authentication. You got to have policies. You got to have policy that tells employees that if you're going to have company email on your phone, have a password on your phone. And that's just one of a lot of policies that should be in a written information security plan, a WISP. Monitor the websites your employees are using, lock down your third-party cloud apps, have a policy or that forces difficult passwords. Don't use anything in the dictionary. If your password is gas station, it's going to get hacked. And then be very mindful of where your employees can access your company data. All right, so the bottom line is to get serious about protecting your company against cybercrime. I hope in this time I've convinced you that it is something that you need to pay attention to, and that it is something that could have a significant impact on your company. But what does it mean? As we said, the first step is to do an assessment. What's lacking right now? What do you have? What don't you have? What systems, where's your data reside? How is that data accessible? And how do I make sure that, and what do I have in place to protect it? When we talk about data and again, data security speak, we worry about CIA. We worry about the confidentiality of the data. Can it get released to the public? The integrity of the data. Can somebody get in and monkey with your QuickBooks numbers? Can somebody go in and change information in your files? And accessibility. Does your data get encrypted? Can I get at it? What happens if it gets encrypted? How do we get it back? So do an assessment of where you stand. Put a plan together. We call this a gap analysis. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to be. And the gap is the gap. What we have to identify what that gap is. And then lastly, it's ongoing maintenance. This is not a set and forget. It's changing all the time. security awareness training. What we were training a year ago is different than what we're training today, because what the threats are today are much different than they what were a year ago. Let's see. All right. I will say the first step is free. I hope this has been educational for everybody. I hope it's given you some insight as to what's happening in the cyber world today. But we are what we're offering is we're offering a free, no cost, no obligation threat assessment. And what that means is we're offering to come into your company and perform that initial assessment and that gap analysis. And what we'll do is we'll look for vulnerabilities. We'll test your firewalls. We'll test your PCs. We'll look at your policies and procedures if you have them, or if you don't. And if you don't, contact us. We can help by providing some templates. We'll work with you to determine where your sensitive data is and classify your data. And we'll find out, do you have appropriate cybersecurity tools in place, tools and policies. Three things I'll tell you about this, though, is this is a time-consuming process, and we're doing this because we care about small businesses. Our mission is, again, to bring enterprise-grade network and security, data security to small and medium-sized businesses. So I'm doing this, but I have to limit it to 3 people, 3 companies. There's absolutely no obligation to buy or to do anything. We'll come in, we'll perform the analysis, and we'll sit with you and review the results. And it's by application only. We'll have a quick phone conversation, make sure that I can actually help do what help you in some manner, and then we'll book an appointment for the assessment. We normally, this is again, it's a kind of a big deal for us, and this is normally $990, but again, for the first 3 on a first come first served basis, we're going to offer this for free. And at the bottom of the slide here is the web address. If you go to fairoaksit.com/discovery call, we'll set up that first 10-minute call and determine if an assessment is right for you, and we'll go from there. So, having said that, we covered a ton of ground. And I see we have a couple of questions that have come in.
Quite a few actually in the background here. I think we talked about a lot of good things, and I think there are some folks who are thirsty to kind of understand more about some of the stats and kind of how, for example, how the assessment process works. What are you looking at? So maybe I've got one question there. Why don't we start there? The question really is just what can we expect when you come on site for a threat assessment? What are the things that you're going to do? It sounds like this person wants to know.
Well, it's going to start off with a brief interview with your management team, whether it's the owner or the IT person with the owner, but a quick interview with the management team. We have some business type questions we want to get through, some business processes we want to understand. And then from the technical side, I'm sure you've all heard of penetration tests that banks are required to do and so forth. Well, we have access to those kind of tools. So we will run a vulnerability analysis on your PCs and on your network. If you have if your email is on Microsoft 365 or SharePoint, we'll run an analysis on that. And then we go away, we compile the data, and then we'll set a time with you to review. And we'll provide you with an executive report to show the general health and status. And then we'll also provide you with an extremely detailed report that you can take, and you can start looking and addressing the vulnerabilities that are pointed out in the detailed report. And again, I'll point out that this is a vulnerability scan, and that's much better than would just be a normal security scan, because what a vulnerability scan, the difference is a vulnerability scan actually proves that we got through this hole, we found this data, here it is. We found a true vulnerability in your system, not just a potential one, we proved it. And that's what you see in the report. And then you can take that information and you can start plugging these holes. You can start changing your systems or whatever you need to do. Give it to your IT company, give it, if you have internal IT, give it to them, let them work through it. Or as always, we're happy to help too if it comes to that.
Yeah. So we've got a couple minutes left, so I think maybe we'll just do one more question. Sorry, there are quite a few questions here, but if you've had a question here that didn't get answered and you want to talk a little more about it, just give us a ring or shoot us an email. Always happy to have conversations about these types of things. Tom and I love talking with other business owners that are going through these issues and want to know more. So not a problem there. But why don't we maybe, since Tom, I think a big stat that you've mentioned here is that employees are obviously your number one risk. There's one question on here about end user training and how companies can get that. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously I know it's something that we can provide, but if you're looking to go get some training done right away, what would you recommend?
Sure. There's some great places to get some training. There's a company called SANS, S-A-N-S. And if you go to sans.org, they have a boatload of training on their site. Some of it is very technical, geared towards the IT professional, but a lot of it is geared towards the end users. For end user training, YouTube has a lot of great information. Just go to YouTube and type in, search for security awareness training, and you'll get a lot of great videos there. There are platforms you can buy into. I will say though that when we looked at the compliance thing, like again, if you're in Massachusetts, you have a requirement to be training your employees. So what does that mean? Like any compliance, if it's not documented, it doesn't count. So if you're doing this sort of training, just make sure you document. On October 27th, we had a staff meeting. Here are the people in attendance, and we watched this video on YouTube.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, again, Fairoaks, for example, we have an entire curriculum. We've got a program. You sign your employees up for it. We take it from there. We've got 300 to 400 videos that all of the employees can watch, all the way from the basics to the more advanced stuff. And any critical part of security awareness training too is also sending fake phishing or spam emails to try to get people to click. That way, you know who your offenders are. You can throw some more training at them, and we've got that curriculum built up. So at the end of the day, if you just don't want to deal with it, again, call us. We can work that out. So Tom, it is noon. So I think we're officially wrapped up. If you want to give us some closing remarks, we can call it a day there. And again, I'll just say, anybody who didn't get their question answered, again, there were quite a few participants here. Please feel free to give us a call. Go to those URLs to book some calls with us, or get your dark web scan, and we can go from there. But Tom, go ahead and close us out.
Well, thanks everybody for attending. I really do enjoy sharing this with other business owners, and I hope you found it helpful. I guess if I make one closing remark, I'll make one recommendation for everybody that's a non-technical recommendation, and that is to if you don't have cyber liability insurance, go look into getting cyber liability insurance. Feel free to give me a call, and I'll give you the soapbox of why I feel that's so important. But I would strongly recommend that everybody out here carry cyber liability insurance for four major reasons. And again, feel free to give me a call and we can talk about it. But I'll leave that as the non-technical thing for you to take away. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you hanging in through the end here. I hope you take advantage of the offers that we made, and we hope to speak with you soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.